Somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a teenage girl looked down. She saw blood. She had no idea what it was. No one had explained it to her, and there was no one to call. And here's the thing, this happened to basically every woman who ever lived. That makes it one of the most universal human experiences in history. It's also one of the least talked about, barely mentioned in most history books. So let's actually talk about it. First, a quick biology detour. It explains everything else. Puberty isn't just growing up. From an evolutionary standpoint, your body runs a constant calculation. Do I have enough resources? Enough to support a pregnancy? Researcher Rose Frisch proposed this. Back in the 1970s, a girl's body needs a minimum threshold, a threshold of body fat, roughly 17%, before menstruation can even begin. Later research refined those numbers, and debated them too. But the core idea holds up. Puberty isn't just about age, it's about energy. Your body checks its own fuel gauge before deciding reproduction is worth it. Which raises an interesting question. If it's about energy, when did puberty actually happen? For a prehistoric teenager, later than you'd probably guess, in modern, well-fed populations, the average age of a first period is around 12 or 13. But researchers studied hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Kalahari's Kung, still living a traditional lifestyle. Anthropologist Nancy Howell studied them. She found menarche happening later, closer to 16 years old. Harder physical activity played a role, so did leaner diets. And energy spent simply surviving. All of it pushes that threshold back. It's a reasonable, evidence-based assumption that prehistoric girls followed a similar pattern. Later, not earlier, than what's normal today. So now picture that 16-year-old, deep in prehistory, experiencing this for the first time. Here's where I have to be honest. We do not know what she thought. Nobody wrote it down. There's no journal, no cave painting captioned "Day 1, extremely confused." Anyone claiming to know her exact reaction is simply guessing. What we can do is look at traditional societies, much more recent ones, but still outside industrial culture. Anthropologists recorded how menarche gets handled. And across many unrelated cultures, first menstruation isn't hidden. It's marked. Sometimes with seclusion, sometimes with ceremony, sometimes with celebration, but almost always recognized as significant. Not a secret. Not something to be embarrassed about. Did prehistoric humans handle it the same way? We genuinely can't say for certain, but it does suggest something. Treating periods as an unspeakable secret is more of a modern habit, not a universal human one. Now here's the frustrating part for archaeologists. Figuring out how prehistoric women managed this is incredibly hard, and for a very unglamorous reason. Whatever they used, plant material, soft hides, anything absorbent, it was organic, and organic material rots. It doesn't fossilize, it doesn't survive thousands of years in soil, it doesn't show up neatly labeled in an archaeological dig. So if you've heard someone confidently claim exactly what cave women used, period, full stop, that's not from a preserved artifact. There isn't one. What we do have are hypotheses. Reasonable, evidence-informed hypotheses, built from what materials were available, and commonly used for other purposes. Things like moss, soft plant fibers, and prepared animal hides. These materials were already part of daily life, used for wound care, and general everyday use. So it's a logical inference that they'd also be used for this. Logical doesn't mean proven, though. Any honest historian will tell you that. The direct evidence simply hasn't survived. Once we hit actual written history, though, the picture gets dramatically clearer, because now people were writing things down. The oldest known women's health document is the Kahun Gynecological Papyrus. It comes from ancient Egypt, dating back to around 1800 BCE. It directly addresses menstrual issues, alongside pregnancy and contraception. A few centuries later came the Aber's Papyrus. From around 1550 BCE, it references irregular versus regular bleeding, a marker doctors were expected to track. Egyptian medicine, in other words, already treated menstruation as legitimate medicine. worth writing an entire scroll about. 3,500 years ago, the Greeks and Romans took it further. A physician named Soranus of Ephesus wrote around the 1st century CE, maybe the 2nd. He produced a detailed 4-volume text, simply called Gynecology. It covered menstruation and anatomy, contraception and childbirth too, in careful, methodical detail. He even recommended rest during particularly difficult periods, advice that honestly sounds pretty familiar even now. So, real medical texts, real historical detail, going back thousands of years, but actual physical menstrual products from antiquity still almost non-existent in the archaeological record. Same reason as before. Cloth and plant fiber don't survive. Historical writers occasionally mention absorbent materials, but modern historians are cautious about how much weight to put on that, since solid primary evidence is thin. When you trace viral fun facts about ancient period products back to their source, the source turns out to be shaky. Which brings us to a genuinely wild final fact. The convenient products most people use today are almost shockingly recent. The very first commercially sold pad was called Lister's Towels. It launched around 1896, and it flopped. Victorian-era society considered it too shameful to advertise, or even discuss openly in stores. It took nurses in World War I. They noticed leftover wound dressing material absorbed blood far better than cloth. That accidentally kickstarted the sanitary pad industry. The tampon with a modern applicator wasn't even patented until 1931, by Dr. Earl Haas. It didn't reach store shelves as Tampax until the mid-1930s. Let that sink in for a second. Humans have been menstruating for the entire existence of our species, hundreds of thousands of years, and the modern, convenient products treated today as completely unremarkable, they're barely a century old. For nearly all of human history, women simply figured it out themselves, generation after generation, using whatever was actually available, with essentially no instructions, no products, and for most of that history, almost total silence about the whole thing, which honestly makes it one of the most quietly impressive threads, running through the entire story of being human.